Hi, I'm Martin Shapiro. I'm in the psychology department, and we're going to talk about the redesign of Psych 36, Introduction to Biopsychology.
And I'm Jennifer Isom-Schmidtke, and I'm also in the psychology department. So some of the big ideas that we have had this semester are to completely change the format of the meeting of our course. Instead of having students come twice a week, we've decided to go with the hybrid format. So we'll have students meet once a week for discussion, and we'll facilitate that discussion and then maybe do some Q&A and go over some terms or maybe some details that need more clarification. But for the other class period, instead of coming to class and listening to lecture, students will have a module that they will go through each week, and they will need to complete the module and take a pre-quiz before class, and then we will focus on the module information during the class period. So the module includes?
It'll be a half an hour lecture from us. We're going to actually split up the load a little bit, so I'll do some and Jen will do some others. And so normally we might lecture for 2.5 hours during the week. This will only be a half an hour, really focusing in on the important components. And the other content will be content from Radiolab, TED Talks, Scientific American articles, Discovery magazine articles, trying to talk a lot about topical issues in neuroscience. Uh, so, um, so some of the big factors that led to this is, well, one, I think we're getting a little tired of the format of just lecturing this content. We like neuroscience. I think it's really interesting, but it can be a little dry for students. And we'd like to make the content a little bit more relative, not only to relevant to their lives, but to their future career, to talk about why neuroscience is important to being a good psychologist or psychology major.
And what we'll need to do to be able to make it more relevant to them is we need to cut back on the sheer amount of content. So just the fact that we had so much material to cover also was a factor contributing to the change of
Yeah.
format.
We offer a second biopsych course in in our department, and I think we're going to start having that one emphasize a lot of the details and have this one be more of an introduction to the field.
So one of the things that we had to deal with was coming up with new outcomes and objectives for the course. And something that was really helpful was when we heard the speaker talk about making your outcomes correspond to your course objectives. And so we are being very specific in our course redesign, and we're creating not only general objectives, but specific ones that will be introduced prior to each week's module, that will be reintroduced as prompts in discussion and also reflection. So the assessment of the outcomes will be very clear and very straightforward.
It's going to be a much bigger part of our class. We're going to not only talk about learning outcomes that are relevant to each week's module, and they really aren't that much different than our old learning outcomes for this course, but we're also going to get into this idea of sort of big trends in neuroscience and have the students constantly bring up not only the material and the learning outcome, but how these trends reflect upon what they're learning in that module and how that is presented in the reflections.
So the idea with one of the ideas with that is that using Bloom's taxonomy as a guide, students will be able to do more synthesizing, more integrating, more creating hypotheses as to why certain behaviors occur on multiple levels of analysis.
Some of the ways that we're going to assess how well this goes is, at the end of last semester, both Jen and I taught this course, and we put out a survey and asked them a lot of different types of questions about the relevance of neuroscience, about their interest in studying this further. And we're going to give the same question at the end. We'll probably also add some other assessment tools that we learned about in this workshop that are a little bit more standardized about not only knowledge and skills, but attitudes towards the field.
Okay, so our timeline for redesigning this course is, well, it started already, and we have quite a bit of work to do because we have to create the modules and then fill the modules, and that includes everything from finding video articles, creating the objectives, even the pre-quizzes and multiple choice and other items for exams. So there's a lot to do, but we've divided it up into Martin will do a share, I'll do a share, and then we have a third colleague who will also take on some of the work. And our plan is to have everything ready to go prior to the start of the fall semester. And if it's not completely ready, at least we'll have the majority of the course ready at that point.
Yeah, see, this is kind of interesting because it's not only making the course new for us, but it's a different way of teaching. We've not taught in this way. We've not used, we're going to use an e-portfolio for the content, like an e-book, and this is going to be free, and we're going to get away from the very large, very expensive intro biopsych books. And so we need to create those. Now, we've already done that. We've created a template e-portfolio. We've added some general outlines. I think we know what we have to do this summer, but I also think we realize it's going to be a lot of work. There's a lot of content to go through.
So, skipping ahead a little bit, that is one of our biggest concerns, that we may not have enough time to complete everything to the extent that we want to have it completed when we want it completed, but we'll just have to work with what we can do.
I think one of my concerns also is that I'm used to being the lecturer. I mean, we have a lot of discussion in my class, but I'm usually the person up at the top going through PowerPoint slides. And I want this to be a good experience for students. And I think the idea is the students will get together for the first 20 minutes of class, talk about the content, and then there's going to be hopefully a lot of back and forth of what wasn't clear. Instead of me just presenting everything, we'll really focus on what the students feel like they really need help with. I think we'll use iClickers to help foster that. I think another thing that I'm worried about is the level and the amount of content. There's so much great material out there. I'm a little worried about overdoing it on the content, and I think at the end of the first semester we're going to have a much better idea how to go forward in this class.
Absolutely, and but I also think too, just adding to the discussion, I think we'll hopefully we'll see students having a greater understanding of the material, and hopefully that'll be reflected in their exam scores as well, because traditionally exam scores that we've given traditional multiple choice exams, and they have not done as well as we'd hope that they would do on those.
Well, what are some of the things you learned about in this workshop?
One of the things I learned about was that we are actually implementing or starting to implement the affordable textbook delivery. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing I'm glad to hear we're doing. I also learned it was really helpful to learn about, who was it? Was it Andrew Lawson?
Andrew Lawson,
who mentioned that you shouldn't be giving any outcomes for your courses that you're not going to assess.
Yeah.
Which made it very crystal clear as to what we need to figure out, what we want the students to learn, and then how we're going to assess that and stick to that.
Yeah, that was a helpful lecture, and we also had some really good discussion in the workshop about not only creating outcomes that are these skill-based, but attitudes and values are a reasonable thing to assess, but also to think about in creating their learning outcomes.
But the challenge with those is trying to find a way to assess things like attitude change and critical thinking and the ability to synthesize and analyze.
Yeah, this has been a real fact-based course in the past. It's anatomy, it's physiology, identify the structure and what does it do, and I think there's a lot more to neuroscience today, especially than when we were taking this course. Some of the things I learned about some really new tools in Blackboard that I think I want to use. Some of the video capturing, some of the making audio files that students can get at easily. I think the new Blackboard looks like it's going to be pretty good. I also like the idea of using maybe Apple TV, maybe purchasing the Apple TV and using my iPad to teach or to implement some of the material.
Yeah, I think that'll be really helpful if I have an iPad from this workshop, and I'll be able to link that with my MacBook and be able to walk around the room during discussion, and then if I need to, I can put things up on the board or the PowerPoint slide.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in conclusion, Jen and I have been talking about this kind of thing for some time. I think all the way back in last fall about trying to really rethink this course and make it really relevant for students. I think we already had the idea of using a lot of the tools we learned about in this workshop. We just learned better ways of doing it. So I'm both nervous about this first delivery of this course. I know it's going to be a lot of work over the summer. I'm actually looking forward to this class mostly in the spring of 2014 when all the dust is settled.
Right.
But I think it's going to be a better class for students, and I think it's going to be a better class for us.